Hello everyone, and it's great to be here to chat to you today about virtual interviews. And we would also like to thank the Prospects team for inviting us along to speak to you. So my name is Emma and I'm here with my colleagues Hannah, Jess, and we're from the Employability team in the School of Management, Swansea University, and we will be guiding through virtual interviews. So as we all know, things have changed for all of us, and the way that businesses and organisations recruit is no different to us or to anybody else. I know they are having to learn to use different technologies just like we are, and the way employers recruit is also different. They are frequently moving to online methods with which to meet candidates, and as candidates ourselves and people, we are having to learn to adapt to these changes. So what we're hoping to do today is to take you through some of these changes and maybe give you some ideas of how you can make the best of it and really make that good impression when you have that virtual interview with the employer, because it will happen if it hasn't already. So the topics we are going to look at today are looking at virtual interviews themselves, really thinking about how you can prepare, looking at your rapport and body language, and then what you can do at the end by following up, and any backup plans or ideas that we think might be really useful for you to think about. So as I said, I'm here with my colleagues, so I'm going to start off the presentation. I'm going to pass across to Jess and then finish off with Hannah. And at the end, we're going to be around for a live Q&A, so please put some questions together to ask us. We're here to answer as many as we can, and it could be anything about what we've discussed today. All right. So what are the differences then? I think it's important to be clear about what live interviews are and what video interviews are, because they both can come up in a recruitment process. And the main difference to point out is that virtual interviews are not to be confused with the recorded ones. Virtual interviews are a live interview where you are in front of and chatting to an actual employer, whereas recorded interviews are when you're answering automated questions into a camera as part of that recruitment process. So what you need to think about with virtual interviews is that you won't have the natural rapport that you can normally have quite easily with face-to-face interviews, and you might have to work harder to build that rapport up. And as I mentioned previously, my colleague Jess will be taking you through how you can build that rapport up as well with the employers to make sure you make that good impression. So recorded interviews tend to be part of a screening process, and they're usually used because they're easy to conduct and they can provide more information about the candidate than just a CV or a cover letter. So they can give a clearer picture of who it is behind the actual camera then for the video interview, and help recruiters navigate that, because they sometimes have so many applications. So normally with a pre-recorded interview, you get a number of set questions, and you'll get a certain time then with which to think of an answer and actually articulate that back then to the employer through that recorded interview. So they are quite different things. So when you get your letter to say you've got an interview, then make sure you understand which type of interview you're having, whether it's a live one or a recorded one. So today we're concentrating on the live interviews, but that's not to say that much of what we discuss today cannot be used within the recorded interview setting. It's the same basic skills that you'll need to use in both. So one of the things we really need to talk about is preparation, because we all know how exciting it is when you get the opportunity to go for an interview. You know, you've had that letter through, or that email, or that phone call, and you know it's brilliant. You've got that chance now to put your views across to the employer. But things can seem a little bit intimidating again, because you're not just speaking with an employer directly. You're having to do it online via a webcam and perform to the best of your ability. So that can seem a little bit off-putting. You know, preparing for an interview, whether it be face-to-face, can be nerve-wracking, or virtual can be nerve-wracking. So, you know, you're not sure who you're going to meet, who's going to be the other side of the camera, what you need to know. And, you know, you can mitigate this by preparing beforehand. And I can't express how important it is to prepare, so that you're taking the stress out of the situation yourself. Right? Seems simple, seems logical, check your tech. Right? It could be one of those things you think, oh, I'll just do it on the day, I'll just leave it last minute, and then there could be nothing worse that you turn your computer on, it doesn't work. You turn your headset on or your camera, they don't work. And you've got half an hour before you've got that interview where you really want to get that job. Don't leave it a chance. Make sure you check it beforehand. And along with that, check your surroundings. Where are you actually conducting this interview? Have you got appropriate surroundings? Make sure there's nothing, like a dodgy poster lurking behind your head that you've obviously had there for ages, but you forget that maybe an employer might actually see that. So make sure what's behind you is clear and fine as well. That is appropriate then for the actual interview itself. In the room you're in, is that distracting? Is there a lot of noise going on? Are you going to get a dog coming in and out, which I sometimes do? Make sure that you've got all of that sort of sorted so you're not disturbed then. See if you can find yourself a quiet space. It may be, if you're able to, at this moment, you could find out, can you use your university library or somewhere on the university campus to actually have that interview then? And they may have slightly better Wi-Fi as well, which might mitigate that risk for you a little bit. And think about what you're wearing. It's really important to dress to impress. These are first impressions that you'll be making. And I think, sometimes when you dress up in that professional outfit, then it can make you feel more professional. It can make you feel a bit more confident then. You're showing your commitment and enthusiasm to the employer because it makes you feel ready for the experience. We often have lots of questions about, what is appropriate. Because I've had interview letters before where they've said casual formal or formal casual, and I'm like, well, you're just telling me two different things there, so I'm not really sure what you mean. But as a go-to sort of rule, I would say if you're not sure what business casual is, a great outfit can be for men and women is a button-down shirt, so a bit like the shirt that I've got on today, and a blazer with some trousers and skirt. All right. And don't be falling into the trap maybe of just wearing smart from the top up. I would go the whole hog and put like your full trousers, skirt on, because you don't know if, somebody might knock your door, maybe you'll have to get up, and then if you're standing up and you've got your favourite spotty pyjamas on, it might well put them off. And I think it also makes you feel a little bit more comfortable and confident if you were actually fully dressed as well. So you feel like you're dressed for the part then, which will enable you to be more natural and give a better impression of yourself. And as I've said, keep practicing, practice. What I always do for any interview, and it's something that I refer back to even now, is I've compiled some sort of standard interview questions and answers relating to the different skills that I feel I have, and maybe relating to the different skills of the job that I'm applying for. So for instance, if I was to be asked about how I demonstrate teamwork or leadership or maybe innovation, problem solving, I can immediately think of something that I've written down that I know I've demonstrated that skill, whether that be something in a part-time role or maybe a voluntary role or a society or something that I'm involved with, or my current role. I can give an example then because I've already reflected back on that. So I know, oh, if I get that question, this is what I'm going to say. All right. I mean, resilience is a very important topic for employers these days, and there's nothing easier to show or to demonstrate is the resilience that lots of students have had, yourselves included, during this pandemic, of how you've had to manage your careers then and develop your skills. That's just have a little think, just reflect back. If somebody asked you a question about, tell me about yourself, what would you say? Be ready for those standard questions, and then the trickier ones will become a lot easier because you've already got an avenue to go down, and then you can just add to that and build on it when you're chatting to the employer. So practice that, make sure you're prepared for that so you're not caught. So, often an employer wants to know what motivates you. So have a think about what does actually motivate you. And if you're not sure, it could be something you could discuss with your employability team in your university. And then, think about how you can practice how you come across on camera. You could just practice on a Zoom call, have a look, record yourself, see how you speak. I'm terrible for fiddling with pens. Try and put things like that down, because again they're distracting. If you're wiggling on your seat a lot, again it can be distracting for the employer. So just have a go at viewing yourself to see how you come across. See if there's little habits you're doing where you're not quite sure you're doing them, so that you're covered for those things. Because sometimes that can hamper your natural response then, if you're sort of fiddling with stuff then. And the same goes then for notes. If you're going to write notes, like I said earlier, prepare some sort of questions and answers to different interview questions, which is great. But then if you're sticking those sort of full things up around your screen, so you've got loads of notes going on, you're probably going to end up going a bit like this and maybe losing your natural thought as well, which can hamper again your rapport, which my colleague Jess will be chatting to you about at the end. And I would say, one of the biggest faux pas of students is not researching the company. Think about it logically. Why would an employer pick a candidate if they don't know anything about their company? They don't know what they do, they don't know what products they sell, what sort of jobs they have, who their competitors are, what's going on in that, what values that company has. It's really important to understand who the company is that you're actually going to apply for and work for. So understand that as well, okay? So really do your commercial awareness. It's so important, and I would say it's the one thing that employers actually come back and tell us is what students didn't do enough research on. Okay, so I hope that's helped with sort of the beginnings of your virtual interviewing. What I'm going to do now is pass across to my colleague Jess, who's going to take you through to the next part. And as I said, we will be doing Q&A at the end, so please prepare some questions that we can answer for you.
Okay, so following on from Emma's section, I'm going to talk to you today about body language. And I would say this is even more important when we are conducting our virtual interviews. Obviously, we don't have the opportunity now to kind of meet somebody face to face, shake hands, make eye contact, and create that, first impression through those body language signals. Instead, you really need to think about how you're coming across and your body language on camera. So it's absolutely fine for you to practice this. So like you've practiced your answers, like you've practiced what you're going to say, you've done your research, don't forget to actually practice kind of your body language and how you are coming across. So things like if you are somebody that naturally fidgets or plays with pens, we do all do it. So it's just something that you need to try and get under control within that interview setting. So try and eliminate your fidgeting, try and get kind of any pens out of the area so that you don't feel tempted to pick it up and play with it while you're talking. If you are the type of person that does get very anxious, that's absolutely fine. This does happen in that interview setting. But to eliminate this, maybe pick up a stress ball and have it in your lap and squeeze it out of view from the employer. So it doesn't look like you're fidgeting, but you can kind of subtly squeeze that stress ball if you are getting a little bit anxious. But generally, just try and eliminate fidgeting because it does convey that you maybe are a little bit nervous. The more kind of calm and still and confident you are, the better you will come across to an employer. You'll seem more in control and you'll seem kind of more trustworthy to maybe put in front of clients, customers in the future because you are coming across really, really confident. Another thing to think about when thinking about your body language and practicing your body language is your posture. This again creates a really kind of important impression to the employer watching the video or speaking to you via Zoom. You don't want to be sort of slumped to one side. You don't want to be too far back in your chair. If somebody comes onto a call like this, there is potentially the idea that they maybe are a bit too relaxed and they're not actually fully engaged in the process. Whereas if somebody is sitting forward with a straight posture, they're in the room and they are sort of coming across as really interested and engaged. And again, an employer will see you as maybe more trustworthy candidate to kind of have in their organisation and speak to their clients or whatever the role is. So posture is really, really important, and again, something that you should be practicing. Have a look at where your camera is set up. Have you got kind of too much space above you, too much space below you? You want to be sort of central in that camera with your nice posture. And lastly, but definitely kind of not least, is think about how you're coming across. So make sure that you are enthusiastic. So are you smiling? Are you kind of showing that you are enthusiastic about the role and the company? So don't be afraid to kind of get that enthusiasm across, and try not to let nerves dampen your enthusiasm. When you're doing your video interviews, especially the recorded ones, it's even more important that you get that enthusiasm across, because if you are just sort of reading off a sheet, if you are kind of reading your notes, that natural conversational enthusiasm isn't going to come across. So make sure that you do sort of become aware of that and practice with your friends and family. The next thing I'm going to talk about is rapport. So obviously rapport is something that we usually build quite easily when we meet people face to face. But this can be done definitely over Zoom and over virtual interviews as well. So you can do this by making sure that you're not sort of stifling your personality in these situations. So don't feel like that you can't sort of say anything unless the employer asks you. It's absolutely fine for you to make conversation, make a bit of small talk before or after the interview. This way you're getting a bit of your personality across. There may be some common interests that you can discuss. Even if you just discuss the weather, that's fine. It just shows that you're able to function in these maybe more high pressured situations, and that you can sort of build that rapport. This will also naturally get the employer to like you, because you're not sort of shut off, you're open to having conversations. Also think about what makes you unique. So when you are providing your answers and your examples, what can you provide your most memorable and unique examples so that you stand out? You know, can you bring your interest, your hobbies, something a little bit different into your example? So again, you are sort of sparking the interest of the employer listening to you, and again, building that rapport. That may lead to a conversation after if you say something really interesting in your interview. Also, pay attention to expressions. So if you are having that kind of Zoom call, don't just look at yourself. Make sure that you are being aware of the expressions the employer is saying. So kind of you can relate to them in that way, and you can use that to kind of form your discussions as well. And lastly, be authentic. Don't be afraid to be yourself. Don't be afraid to get a bit of personality. The more sort of genuine you are in your interviews, the better you are going to come across. Again, if it's someone that is just reading off a sheet, saying what the employer wants them to say, not being genuine, not bringing their own personal experience into the interview, is not going to come across as well. Whereas actually, if you're bringing your own authentic experiences, you're making conversation, and you're not being afraid to be yourself, you'll come across much better, and you'll definitely stand out.
Okay, so you've done all your prep, you've done all your research, you've hopefully avoided any video interview blunders on screen. You've completed your virtual interview, you can relax, it's done, that kind of relief of having done your interview should all be there. You might think your work is done completely. So what we suggest that you do is do a follow-up. So when we ask the question with students generally, who has ever sent a follow-up email to an employer, the answer is always no. So we suggest that you are not those people, and that you are the type of person that starts to get into the practice of sending a follow-up email after you've had an interview. So the potential gains that you could get, are endless. If you send a very professional email, you leave an additional kind of positive impression with both the panel and the employer in general. You could influence their decision potentially if they were kind of on the fence between two different candidates, and then you're the one that sends that, really professional follow-up and the others don't. You don't know kind of what the impact could be. If you don't end up being chosen for the opportunity that you've interviewed for, it is still good to send a follow-up saying thank you for their time, that you really enjoyed the opportunity, and if there are any more questions that they may have, you are available. So what we recommend that you do is either try and get the direct contact details of the people that were on the panel. You can either do that through kind of like the HR person, or maybe you have the contact details of the people that interviewed you, or if you try and make a note of their names, you could also message them on LinkedIn to say thank you as well if you can't find email addresses. So it doesn't have to be a complicated email. It is literally dear, the name of the person that interviewed you. Just wanted to get in touch to say thank you so much for taking the time to interview me this week. I really enjoyed the opportunity to be interviewed and to meet yourself and the other panel members. If there are any additional questions you have for me, please know that I'm available. So it doesn't have to be complicated, it doesn't take long, it's a very short email or message, but the potential gains could be huge, so we really recommend that. So I'm sure we've all had issues with either our Wi-Fi or our laptops or any of the devices that we're all so reliant on at the moment this year. Things do go wrong. We can't do anything about that. It doesn't mean you're a bad candidate for a role. It doesn't mean that they're suddenly gonna think, oh, their tech's bad, I'm not gonna give them the opportunity to work for us. But if you are prepared and you have a backup plan for if something does go wrong, you are demonstrating to them that you have planned ahead. You've demonstrated that you can deal with a slightly stressful situation. You're demonstrating really positive skills, and it also means that you will be calm because you know that if something does go wrong, it's not the end of the world, and it hasn't all gone kind of belly up. So what we suggest that you do is make a note of the contact details of the people on the panel or the HR person or whoever has kind of organised that interview with you. Try and get a telephone number. Note down names, note down email addresses, so that if your laptop does crash or the device that you are on does crash, you've got a backup way to contact them, to explain the situation, to either ask, or just give me a couple of minutes, I'm just going to kind of restart my laptop, or I'm really sorry, my entire Wi-Fi is down, I'm going to have to reschedule. You are showing that you are professional and that you've, as I said, you've got a plan, that you're prepared, and it doesn't then kind of derail the whole interview. So always have a backup plan. Okay, so I'm just going to cover some kind of summary do's and don'ts. Hopefully, you've got a good idea now of how to prepare, how to conduct yourself, and how to be successful in a virtual interview. So just remember, in terms of do's, do prepare your space, make sure there's no distractions, make sure you're putting everything in place to have a stress-free, calm environment to actually conduct your video interview. Do your research. As Emma said, commercial awareness is one of the most important things that employers tell us students don't always have when they're being interviewed, so do your research. Check your tech, make sure it works. If a company is using a particular type of software to conduct the video interview, make sure you have tested that, you've downloaded it, maybe you've had someone help you test it, get a friend to just kind of make sure everything works, make sure your mic works, make sure your camera works, anything that you can do that you don't have to do on the day beforehand, do it. So create the backup plans, as I mentioned, get contact details, have a plan in place for if something does go wrong. Hopefully it won't, but it's always good to be prepared, and it will help with kind of the anxiety and the stress kind of levels that Jess mentioned. So practice, practice, practice. The more you practice, the more familiar you are with the process, the calmer you are going to feel, and the better you are going to perform. Send a follow-up email. As I said, it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be, some massive essay trying to impress them again, but just the fact that you're sending a quick professional thank you does make, a really, really good impression on employers. So don't dress casually. Remember, this is, a first impression. This could be the last impression you have on certain individuals. Don't be tempted to do the kind of business on top, pyjamas on the bottom. If you spilt your water and you had to jump up and you're in your pyjamas, while it might make the panel laugh, it doesn't suggest that you're taking the interview very seriously. So dress appropriately. Don't rely on notes. There's nothing worse than interviewing someone and they're constantly kind of looking down. It's obvious that they're relying on notes, or, it just makes you look distracted, which isn't professional. If you, have done loads of research and you think to yourself, oh my God, I'm never going to remember all of this, try and focus on, 4 or 5 key bits of research that you found particularly interesting when you were doing it. If you found out that they do a lot for the environment and that's something interesting to you, it will stick in your mind and you'll be able to talk about it far more easily than, trying to remember their, financial history or, some of the other research you may have done. Don't forget to ask questions at the end. The power of a question at the end is huge. You could ask a question that demonstrates that you've done your research and that you're also already, picturing yourself as an employee of the company. I mentioned kind of, the environment or charity stuff. You could say, on my research, I saw that, the finance department that I'm hoping to join regularly does charity football matches. I love football. I am a keen kind of volunteer, and I often do quite a lot of charity work, so that would be something I'd find really interesting. Is that something that I can get involved with, as soon as I start with you? Or, as a placement student, can I get involved with the charity work that the company does? Try and ask intelligent questions. Don't ask about, how much holiday you're going to get, what bonuses you're going to get. Ask about training, ask how you can impress them in the first 6 months. If you've done your research beforehand and checked out who's interviewing you on LinkedIn, you could ask them a personal question, which is always really nice for the interviewer to feel like you've done your research. So that's it from us. Hopefully you've got, everything you need there to be as successful as possible doing a virtual interview. Don't forget, there may be teams like myself, Emma and Jess, for the School of Management at Swansea University. There may be kind of careers department. You may have staff that are here to help you, so don't forget to reach out and get as much kind of support as you can.
Hi everybody, so I hope you've enjoyed our videos today. So we're going to ask some questions now, so if you've got any you want to pose, then please put them forward. I can see we've already got some in the chat. So if I start with one from Louise Walker. So how would you answer the tell me about yourself question? I think Hannah will probably agree this is quite a common question that we get with students, often get asked that. And it is quite difficult because you could be sitting there, and somebody says, tell me about yourself. You're like, oh, well, I could start with like my family, or I could start about work. I could go, there's a breadth what you could say there. So we always say, do a little bit a rounded sort of summary of where you are, what you're currently doing, maybe something about your hobbies, just to make it interesting so that you can sort of introduce yourself that way. I don't know if you got any more to say on that, Han.
Yeah, as you said, it's nice to get a breadth of the different areas about yourself. So you could either approach it a little bit like a timeline. So you could, where you grew up, where you went to school, take yourself through university, and you'll, talk about your studies, talk about work experience, and then you can kind of bring yourself back to the moment you're in now. And you could say, and that's what brings me to where I am today, and I'm really excited to be in this interview. Or you can think about your CV and try and tick off the classic areas, a little bit about yourself. What are your kind of, core values, if that's something that kind of resonates with you, something about your studies, something about your work experience, and then a little bit of some personal stuff about you. And then you're kind of ticking off all the areas that they would consider to be looking for at an interview environment. Shall I look at the next one?
Yeah, I think we haven't got much time. Like, we have got one question there I've seen about small talk and building rapport with employers, and how personal should your questions to the employer be? I don't know whether you've got a view on that, Han.
Yeah, so you're either kind of a natural at it or it's something that you have to think about. I'm trying to think of things that you would not want to talk about. I can cover things that are okay. So, once you're kind of on the kind of the call with them, you get a break before they start asking you questions. You can, you know, talk about anything from, you know, the weather, the in at the moment. You know, you could ask about how they're finding work from home, if they're working from home, you know, how have they adapted 2020 and the disaster that it's been. So anything that is kind of on topic and relevant is absolutely fine. You know, you might find they prompt something, you know, try not to overthink it. You know, as long as you're not talking about anything, you know, negative to do with the company or negative about anything like that, you should be fine.
Okay, I think they've given us a little bit extra time, but just to get a couple more questions in. Somebody's asked about when you're talking to the camera online, should you be looking at the camera or should you be looking at the screen? I think it's a really good question. I would do both, because if you were in an actual interview, you wouldn't be staring at the person to give them eye contact all the way through. That would be a bit frightening for them. So look at the camera, look at the screen, so that you're generally giving that sort of good body language then. I think we've got another one here about recommendations for telephone interview. Again, I think a lot of that's to do with your voice, trying to make sure that you're as bubbly and as warm as you can be. Would you agree with that, Han? And I think this might have to be our last question then as well.
Yeah, they've done studies around if you smile when you're talking, it does actually make a difference in how you sound. But again, you know, with the telephone interviews, if you get the chance to make it conversational, you know, try to at either the beginning, at the end. Don't be afraid to ask for a question to be repeated. On the phone, it can be more difficult to kind of, you know, really hear what they're asking for. Don't be afraid to kind of take charge a little bit, ask for the question again, ask for clarification. Always try to kind of end on a positive, you know, again, thank them for the call, for the time that they've spent. And if you've got a telephone interview, don't let that be the first conversation you have that day. I don't know if anybody else finds this, but if you haven't spoken yet all morning, the first couple of words can kind of croak out a little bit. So make sure that you have spoken, you've given yourself time before the phone is going to ring, just to kind of either talk to yourself or talk to somebody. Yeah, just so that it doesn't sound like you just got up or yeah, anything like that.
Okay, well, thanks everybody for watching today. I'm sorry we didn't have more time to answer questions. Please feel free to connect to Hannah and myself on LinkedIn. We're there. You can always pose your questions there to us as well. And I've been told to remind you that the session is on demand section, and that will be available until Christmas, if you really want to watch us again, that is. But otherwise, thanks for your attention today, and nice to see you all.